You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and happy Monday to you. Friday the 13th is now behind us, but Mercury is still retrograde. Who knows what all this stuff means? I don't know. Anyhow, Mark Dubowitz is on the line with us. He's the executive director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, defenddemocracy.org, one of the... Would you call yourselves neoconservatives, Mark?
No, Tom. We're actually a nonpartisan organization, works equally with Democrats and Republicans, and defends democratic values, gay rights, women's rights, minority rights.
But you were gung-ho for the war in Iraq, right?
I was never been working 10 years on Iran, and never worked on the Iraq issue. And,
no, I mean your organization.
There were people in my organization who supported the war in Iraq. There were others who didn't. We had a pretty lively debate about it at the time.
Interesting, because we had a couple of your people on defending it back in 2003.
Sure.
In any case, you from what I'm reading here, you're saying we should not form any kind of an alliance with Iran whatsoever with regard to what's going on in Iraq right now. Do I have that right?
Well, that's right, Tom. I mean, Iran, helped to turn both Syria and Iraq into a jihadist inferno, which threatens American security, and now, ironically, is positioning itself as a firewall against the very violence that it created.
Well, aren't the guys ISIS, these jihadis, aren't they being funded by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, and us?
Well, we're not funding ISIS.
We're funding them in Syria.
Well, we're not funding ISIS. The United States has been very careful. In fact, if anything, I think our biggest mistake is we haven't supported the moderate secular Syrian opposition. But you're right, the Saudis, the Qataris, and others have been funding the Syrian jihadists. So that's been a...
So should we stop, if you want to stop talking to Iran because they're, supporting the al-Maliki government? I mean, is that... I don't understand. The Quds forces that have gone into Iraq have gone in to defend the Iraqi government that we helped set up.
Yeah, Tom, it's interesting. I'm in favor of always talking to the enemies of the United States. I was in favor of talking to Iran about its nuclear program. I got no problem talking to the Iranian regime about anything, but let's be very clear about who this regime is. And maybe as a precondition to talking to them about supporting them in Iraq, maybe they should apologize to the families of the servicemen that they helped kill in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I think that is the fundamental difference. Iran has been at war with the United States for over 3 decades. They've killed our men and women, our diplomats, our civilians, our service members. And we should be open-eyed about who this regime is and not be willing to jump into some unholy alliance with them just because we're finding ourselves potentially...
if we were Israelis, I'd get it, Hezbollah. But it seems to me that we took down a secular government, Saddam Hussein's government, and ever since then the Sunnis and Shia have been fighting each other, and we've been trying to occupy this country ever since we won the war. 3 weeks in, we took down the government, and then we tried to occupy the country for another 10 years. That didn't work out real well. It typically doesn't, and we're supposed to blame them?
Well, first of all, Tom, I mean, the Sunnis and Shias have been fighting with each other for over 1,000 years.
Not in Iraq, they weren't. There'd never been a suicide bombing in Iraq ever in the 7,000-year history of that country until we invaded the country.
Tom, the fact of the matter is, if you look at the history of the Islamic world over centuries, there's been a bitter feud between Shias and Sunnis. The notion that some of the United States actually caused this feud is I think... No,
I'm not saying we caused the feud, but Saddam Hussein had put a lid on that thing in Iraq. I mean, one of the problems that happened in Baghdad after we invaded and knocked down the government was that there were all these mixed neighborhoods and mixed marriages between Sunni and Shia. They've resegregated now on either side of the Euphrates, but when we first went in there, they were not resegregated. They were fairly well integrated, and so once Saddam was out of the way, they started killing each other. I mean, how is that not our fault? I don't get it. How that's Iran's fault.
So the fact of the matter is, as you probably know, over more than a decade of war, the Iranians have been fanning the flames of sectarian warfare and jihadism both in Levant and in Mesopotamia. I mean, that's just a fact, and that's what the U.S. government, both administrations acknowledge that. So let's not ignore that or be deluded that somehow Iran is a partner in peace in this. The fact is the Iranians have core strategic interests. They want to dominate that area. They're building a nuclear weapons capability, and they're converting all of this into negotiating leverage at the negotiating table. The last thing we want to do...
Wouldn't you?
Well, of course I would, but let's be cognizant of what they're doing, and let's be careful. At the end of the day, Iran has been an enemy of the United States for decades. They've been killing our men and women, and now they're finding themselves on the receiving end of a Sunni extremist.
Where and when has Iran killed our men and women?
Really, Tom?
Yeah.
You don't know the history of when Iran has killed American men and women?
No, please tell me.
Iran has been the major supporter of Hezbollah.
Right.
Hezbollah has killed Americans for decades. It's kidnapped our diplomats. It killed the Marines in Beirut,
in Lebanon during the Reagan administration, and Reagan cut and run.
The Clinton administration for killing American troops in Saudi Arabia at Khobar Towers. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, all you have to do is actually.
Well, this is where they were going after the Sunnis. I mean, this is all of these things are because we have inserted because God put our oil underneath their sand, and we've inserted ourselves into that region. I don't recall there being any Shias on those planes that hit us on 9/11, and I don't recall any Shia. Correct me if I'm wrong. Any Shia Muslims of the 27 attacks since 9/11 on American soil of Americans? They've all been Sunnis, haven't they?
Yeah, Tom. The State Department every year actually has an annual report naming Iran as the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They detail, and you should read the report.
I realize that. They're going after, and Hezbollah
Tom,
is a real problem for Israel, but
Tom,
not for us.
You clearly have missed the report because it details in a lot of granularity how Iran, directly and through its proxies, have killed Americans over the years. And I think to ignore that is to ignore an obvious reality that we need to deal with. Now, the question
Are they killing Canadians?
I'm sorry?
Are they killing Mexicans?
Iran has, through its proxies, has killed Europeans, killed Argentines, has killed Thais, has called people all around the world. I mean, again, you got to read the report, Tom. You're obviously not reading the report. You're not up to speed on exactly what Iran has done over the decades. There's a reason why they've been called by our State Department the leading sponsor of terrorism around the world.
So, what's your solution for this, Mark?
Well, the solution to this is not be deluded into thinking that somehow Iran.
Okay, so we're not deluded. What's your solution?
Our solution to this is we've got to stop supporting groups in the Middle East that are extremists. We've got
okay, so we stop giving them money, we stop supporting them. What's the solution to? Do we bomb them back to the Stone Age? I mean, or do we just walk away from them? Do we do what Ronald Reagan did after they apparently Iran, or I thought it was Hezbollah, killed the 200 and some odd Marines? Reagan just cut and run. He just came back to the United States and said, "That's it. We're out of Lebanon." Isn't that what we should do? Shouldn't we take a lesson from Reagan?
No, I don't think we should take a lesson from Reagan because somebody named Osama bin Laden took a lesson from Ronald Reagan, and he believed.
Well, Reagan was funding bin Laden back then.
Well, Reagan was never funding bin Laden. Reagan was funding the Northern Alliance. The Saudis were funding Al Qaeda and bin Laden. It's really important to get these historical facts.
Bin Laden was part of the group that was fighting against the Soviets at that time.
There were two groups fighting the Soviets. There was the Northern Alliance, and then there was bin Laden and the jihadists. The Saudis were funding the jihadists. We were funding a much more secular, moderate opposition. Now, you're absolutely right. You put your finger on something, which is the Saudis have also been a major problem. They funded extremism around the world. They are a brutal Wahhabi regime that doesn't.
So should we bomb them?
Gay rights. Well, I'm not suggesting we should bomb anybody. What I'm suggesting is let's take a step back, take a deep breath, and recognize who our enemies are and who our allies are.
Okay, step back and deep breath sounds good. Mark Dubowitz, hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The website defenddemocracy.org. Mark, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll be back.